Foreign boots marched through the streets of Warsaw. Our country was carved up by those who surrounded us, yet we fought on. We fought with Napoleon. We fought on our own. We fought for our liberation and independence. And even when uprising after uprising was crushed, we did not give up. When our capital fell, we did not lose hope. We developed a phrase to define our struggle. Jeszcze Polska nie zginęła. Poland is not yet lost. Though the Commonwealth had been defeated, the Poles' faith in their country never died. During the very same year as their nation was eliminated from the map, talk of return and revolution was already running through the minds of many Poles. In France, Polish units served within the army. In Moldavia, Colonel Denisko engaged the Austrians with a force of only 1,000 men. And in Milan, Jan Henryk Zamoyski formed the Polish Legion. They wore Polish uniforms, Italian epaulettes, and French cockades. As they marched, they sang a song we know today as the Polish national anthem. To the Poles, Napoleon was a savior. He was hope. Yet his true intentions could not be further from the truth. 2 more Polish legions would be established during the War of the Second Coalition, one in Italy and one along the Danube River. However, they would both suffer heavy casualties. As the war came to a close and Napoleon made peace with Austria, Poland never got their chance at insurrection. Zamoyski's legion would temporarily become the new army of Lombardy, and the other units would be scattered amongst the French army, or even disbanded. To many Poles, Napoleon had abandoned them, and yet despite this, tens of thousands would rally to fight with the French yet again in 1803. It was their only chance at revival. By 1806, Napoleon had defeated the Prussians at the battles of Jena and Auerstedt. Zamoyski's Polish corps entered Poznan as he finally let loose the call for insurrection. In late November, Warsaw was finally liberated, and Napoleon arrived shortly after. The next big step would be a treaty between France and Russia to decide the fate of Poland. Napoleon wished to use Polish nationalism in order to secure Russia as an ally against both Prussia and Austria. Here's where his true colors were put on full display. He had France sell Polish lands back to the new Duchy of Poland at large markups. He had the duchy pay for its own standing army of 60,000 men, while also calling upon Polish units to join him in his peninsular campaign. When Austria invaded the duchy, the Poles threw them back on their own, capturing yet more land. Yet Napoleon even made it clear he was willing to give them over to Russia in exchange for a marriage to the sister of the Tsar. Yet despite all of this, the Poles stuck with Napoleon. 98,000 joined his grand army on the invasion of Russia. Polish dragoons were the first into Moscow, and the Poles fought bravely from the Borodino to the Berezina crossings. When the campaign went south, it was the Poles that covered Napoleon's retreat. 72,000 of them never returned, and Poland was left abandoned by the French. Yet Józef Poniatowski, the key general, and a man who certainly deserves his own video, took 16,000 men to defend Kraków. He would eventually die at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. When Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba, this left the Sixth Coalition with the problem of a very rowdy Polish population that would not easily be subdued. So in 1815, a new plan for Poland was formed. A constitutional kingdom of Poland would be carved out of the previous partitions, and the city of Kraków would be turned into a republic. The new kingdom of Poland would be ruled by the Tsar of Russia. However, it would operate with an independent Senate and Sejm, which opened in 1818. This lasted for all of about 2 years, for in 1820, Tsar Alexander dissolved the Sejm for insubordination. As the 1820s progressed, the minimal freedom the kingdom was granted began to erode away, all culminating in an uprising that would shake the nation. Despite the intentions of the student body of Wilno University to carry out a swift execution of their plans, the beginning of the uprising went about as poorly as it could possibly have gone. Grand Duke Constantine, a target for assassination, was able to escape. Initial confrontations with the Russian units did not result in the dispersal of their forces, and in the midst of mass lynchings of Russians and Polish conspirators, the revolutionaries accidentally lynched 2 of their own generals instead. Initially, the Polish government of the Congressional Kingdom tried to deal with the problem internally, but when Tsar Nicholas sent a letter to the Polish government demanding the full unconditional surrender of the state itself without any precondition of negotiations, the uprising turned into war. The Sejm voted to oust the Tsar as the King of Poland. A new government formed under Adam Czartoryski, and Poland officially seceded from Russia. The November Uprising had begun. The opening salvos came when a force of 115,000 men under General Diebicz attempted to march on Warsaw. However, the Polish garrison, consisting of only 30,000 men, blocked his advance on the 25th of February. In 3 separate battles, the Russians were routed time and time again. This forced Diebicz to retreat and abandon Lublin altogether. For a moment, it looked as if Poland would be able to snatch total victory from the jaws of defeat. Diebicz was isolated. His reinforcements were open for Polish interception, and with 80,000 reservists, plus some Lithuanian contingents, the Polish army now stood at about 200,000 men strong. Older Napoleonic-era officers joined the fight on the Polish side. Volunteers from Germany, Hungary, Italy, and even Britain flowed in. Yet Polish high command failed to seize the situation. They believed that ultimate victory was impossible, and negotiations were the better course of action. The generals failed to intercept Diebicz's reinforcements. Together they inflicted a defeat on the Poles at Ostrołęka in May. Diebicz would die of cholera, but the new general Paskiewicz was a good commander. The international support for Poland was immense. German sympathy was strong, American support was similar. The city of Boston even offered up standards for the Polish army. However, it was not enough to save the Poles. The Russians moved north and flanked Warsaw, attacking from the west. In September, after 2 days of heavy fighting, Warsaw fell, and the remaining 70,000 troops in the field either surrendered or escaped into Prussia. The uprising had failed. As the occupation continued, the Polish state in Russia eroded away. 1832 saw the Constitution done away with, as well as the army and legislative assembly. However, this was not the only place the Poles suffered. Just across the border, in Prussia, things were going from bad to worse. Initially, the semi-autonomous province of Posen was without much persecution. The Prussian army watched carefully during the November uprising, but there was no threat to be found. However, as the situation pressed onward, the Germans began to fear Polish nationalism and aspirations. As calls were made to defend Germandom, and the Poles were called a nation of lesser cultural content in the Frankfurt Parliament, the Polish situation only worsened. By 1874, Polish textbooks were banned. In 1878, only German was allowed to be used in the postal service or courts of law, and in 1887, the study of Polish was banned throughout German schools. Despite some small concessions by the German Chancellor Leo von Caprivi, everything turned for the worst in the 1890s. Racial theories calling the Slavs an inferior race and playing into German fears of Poles by politicians began to build up. Kaiser Wilhelm II would even call upon the spirits of the dead Teutonic Knights to aid in his fight against Polish impudence while speaking in Marienburg. The German Colonization Commission bought tracts of Polish land and gave it to German settlers and colonists. By 1898, Poles had become second-class citizens, but they wouldn't remain so for long. Hopping across the borders once again, we find ourselves in the Galician province of Austria-Hungary. This is a much easier topic to discuss. Initially, the empire placed very heavy taxes on the province and blocked its economic development. As this inevitably caused unrest in the province, martial law would be declared in 1848, and until 1854. However, as 1859 came around, Austria-Hungary fell into crisis. The Poles managed to seize on this by having many reforms passed. By 1864, the Galician province had a de facto autonomy, its own Sejm, and the Polish viceroy to the emperor. Polish was the official language, and education was left up to local discretion. Compared to the Poles living in Russia and Germany, the Galician province did very well for the next 50 years. As the Congress Kingdom of Poland eroded away to Russia, the focus of the Poles was on keeping their traditions and way of life alive. To a few, this could only happen through struggle and revolution, yet it was a clear minority. As the years ticked by, economic growth and agricultural development created a large rise in population, leading to a larger population which held discontent with the Russian government. By 1863, the Russian loss in the Crimean War led to yet another uprising, this one through Poland and Lithuania, even a bit into Galicia, yet once again it failed. I'm going to spare the details of this uprising as we still have quite a bit of history to get to. However, the biggest takeaway is that after this, the Congress Kingdom of Poland ceased to exist completely. After over 100 years of occupation and discrimination, Poland would yet rise out of the dust to reclaim its independence on the world stage. This would not be easy though. As the First World War began, the Poles would find themselves split amongst three armies of Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. It was not uncommon for Poles to be placed only a no man's land away from their brethren on the opposite trench. Much of the war on the Eastern Front took place in Polish lands, which was devastating to the local population. However, many Poles, especially those in Austria-Hungary, saw this war as a chance for independence. Józef Pilsudski, the leader of the Galician riflemen, along with Władysław Sikorski and more, formed three Polish legions within the Austro-Hungarian army. On the Russian side, Polish legions were also formed with the same dream of independence. During the war, the Austrians and Germans came together to form a new Polish state in occupied Russian lands. This Polish government was originally supported by many Poles, but as it was shown to be nothing more than a puppet, things quickly fell apart. It wasn't until the armistice was signed in 1918 that Poland was officially given independence. So this is where we will leave the Polish state for today. I will be making a part 3. However, I do want to get some other videos out first. So far, we have covered the majority of Polish history, especially the lesser taught sections on YouTube. Thank you for watching. This is the History Broadcast signing off.